The house was still buzzing in Laura's ears even after the music stopped, as if the walls themselves remembered the laughter that had filled every corner just minutes ago, and as she moved through the living room collecting empty cups and folded napkins, she felt that familiar mix of relief and sadness that always came after a celebration ended, because parties, no matter how joyful, always left behind a quiet that felt too large for the space it filled. Noah's 18th birthday had been simple but warm, with close friends, easy jokes, and the kind of happiness that made time pass faster than expected, and Laura had watched it all with the quiet pride of a mother who had learned to celebrate from the background, smiling when her son smiled, stepping back when he didn't need her near, believing that this was what love looked like as children grew older. Yet as the last guest waved goodbye and the front door closed with a soft, final click, she realized something was off, because the living room light was still on, casting a pale glow over the couch and the bookshelf, and she froze for a second, wondering if she had imagined it, before spotting Ethan standing near the window, his jacket still on, his posture unsure, as if he was waiting for permission to exist in the space. He was Noah's closest friend, tall, polite, and usually quick with a smile, but tonight he looked different, quieter, almost weighed down by something invisible, and when Laura cleared her throat gently, he turned, startled, apologizing right away as if staying late was a mistake he had already decided to regret, and she reassured him with a calm tone that surprised even herself, telling him it was fine, asking if he was waiting for Noah, and when he said no, that he had hoped to talk to her instead, she felt a pause settle between them, not uncomfortable but charged, like a moment before rain, and though she didn't know why, she nodded and invited him to sit, sensing that whatever he carried had been waiting for the noise to fade before it could speak. They sat across from each other with the remnants of the party around them, the streamers sagging, the cake half-eaten, the room holding the memory of joy, and Ethan struggled to find his words, explaining that he hadn't meant to overstay, that he just hadn't wanted to go home yet, and Laura listened closely, noticing the careful way he spoke, the respect in his tone, the hesitation that hinted at something deeper than teenage awkwardness. And when he finally admitted that her house felt safe, that being there made him feel steady in a way he hadn't felt in a long time, she felt a quiet ache open in her chest, because she understood that feeling too well. He talked about his parents' recent divorce, about how his home no longer felt like a place to rest, about how he spent more time with Noah not just because they were friends, but because the warmth of this house reminded him of what stability felt like, and Laura realized that in all her focus on Noah's happiness, she hadn't noticed how many young people passed through her life carrying silent struggles, and as Ethan spoke, she saw him not just as her son's friend, but as a young man standing on the edge of adulthood, unsure where to place his emotions, unsure who would listen without judgment. When he said she reminded him of his mother but also different, more present, more patient, Laura felt the weight of the words settle gently but firmly. And she chose her response carefully, offering kindness without confusion, warmth without promise, telling him she was glad he felt comfortable, that he was always welcome, and in that moment, she sensed the conversation turning into something more meaningful than either of them had planned, not dramatic or inappropriate, but honest in a way that demanded attention, and as the clock ticked quietly on the wall, Laura understood that this night, which had begun as a simple birthday celebration, had shifted into something else entirely, a quiet moment of connection that neither of them would forget, because sometimes the most important conversations don't announce themselves loudly, they arrive softly, after the laughter fades, when two people realize they are not as alone as they thought. The room felt smaller once the conversation truly began, not because of the space, but because of the honesty slowly filling it, and Ethan leaned forward slightly as if speaking too loudly might break something fragile, explaining that he rarely talked about his family anymore because every conversation seemed to turn into questions he didn't know how to answer, and Laura listened without interrupting, her hands folded calmly in her lap, giving him the kind of attention that made words come easier. He spoke about nights spent pretending everything was fine, about smiling at school while carrying a constant pressure inside his chest, and about how being at Noah's party, surrounded by laughter and simple happiness, had reminded him of a version of life he missed, one where things felt balanced and secure, and he admitted that watching Laura move through the house, checking on guests, laughing softly with parents, and making sure everyone felt welcome had stayed with him all evening, not in a confusing way, but in a grounding one, like seeing a light in a familiar place. Laura felt the weight of his words but kept her expression steady, understanding that what he needed most was not answers but space. And as he continued, he shared how adulthood felt closer than ever yet. More frightening, how he feared becoming someone closed off or bitter if he didn't learn how to talk about what hurt, and he said that she seemed like someone who understood quiet pain, someone who didn't rush people through their feelings, and that trust moved her deeply because she recognized herself in his struggle, remembering her own younger years filled with unspoken worries and the longing for someone to simply listen. She responded gently, telling him that pain didn't mean weakness. That learning to speak honestly was a strength many adults never developed, and that it was okay to feel lost at times, especially when life changed suddenly, and Ethan's shoulders relaxed as if those simple words had released something he'd been holding for months. He admitted that he hadn't planned to say any of this, that the words had surprised even him, but that staying silent suddenly felt impossible, and Laura nodded, encouraging him with quiet understanding, reminding him that feelings didn't need labels to be real, they just needed care. And as the conversation flowed, it became clear that what passed between them was not temptation or confusion, but recognition, two people from different stages of life meeting in a shared moment of vulnerability. And when Ethan finally paused, letting the silence settle without fear, Laura knew this exchange mattered because it had given him relief and reminded her that even in the role of a mother, she was still a person capable of offering comfort beyond her own child. And as the night deepened and the house grew quieter, the conversation stood as a turning point, not loud or dramatic, but steady and sincere, shaping a memory built on trust, respect, and the simple power of being heard. Laura felt the tension in the room shift as she stood and moved toward the window, needing the distance to gather her thoughts, the quiet hum of the night outside mixing with the faint echo of the party's laughter still trapped in the walls. And she realized that what had begun as a simple conversation about comfort and honesty had grown into something deeper, a moment that stirred emotions neither of them had expected. And as Ethan watched her, she spoke carefully, choosing each word to balance kindness with boundaries, acknowledging the feelings he had shared while reminding him that there were lines in life that must remain clear, that she could care and offer understanding without overstepping her role as his friend's mother. And he nodded slowly, absorbing her words with a seriousness that made her heart ache a little, because she understood how difficult it was to restrain emotions that felt natural but needed to be guided with wisdom. He admitted that he wasn't seeking more than comfort, that he simply wanted someone to listen without judgment, and Laura felt the truth in that, recognizing that connection didn't always demand action, sometimes it simply demanded presence. And she told him he would not have to carry his feelings alone, that support could exist in a safe and thoughtful way, without confusing intentions or risking harm. And as she spoke, Ethan's expression shifted from hesitation to relief, the tightness in his chest loosening slightly as if her words had created a bridge for him to step over the loneliness he had been navigating for months. And the room grew still in a way that felt purposeful, not empty, as they both understood the gravity of honest emotions handled responsibly, a quiet understanding passing between them that honored their bond without blurring the boundaries that life required. Laura's mind wandered briefly to her own experiences with restraint, with learning that maturity often involved making choices that were hard but necessary, and she felt a subtle pride in the clarity she could offer, knowing that empathy and structure could coexist. And as Ethan spoke again, he thanked her, simple words carrying the weight of relief and gratitude, and she responded with a calm smile, affirming that care didn't have to be complicated to be meaningful, and that the moments they shared, though brief, had created a space where honesty was safe, where feelings could exist without danger. And as the night deepened, they sat together quietly, the soft hum of the refrigerator and the muted streetlights outside providing a gentle soundtrack, both absorbing the lessons of the evening, both changed in small but important ways. Laura reminded herself that life often asked for patience and presence, for guiding others while honoring her own role, and Ethan felt a warmth that had been missing, a sense that connection could exist even when unspoken boundaries remained firm. And in that delicate balance of care, respect, and honesty, they discovered the true meaning of understanding, a connection that didn't need labels, didn't need promises, but existed purely because two people had chosen to be fully present for each other at a moment when it mattered most. And as they continued in that quiet, thoughtful space, Laura realized that sometimes the right conversations didn't solve problems or erase loneliness, but they offered something just as powerful, recognition, compassion, and the quiet reassurance that no one needed to face life's challenges completely alone, and that even amidst complex emotions and unspoken longings, maturity could guide hearts to act with integrity, and the night, though still filled with echoes of celebration, had transformed into a meaningful memory, one that would linger in their minds, not with drama or temptation, but with the simple, enduring beauty of care handled wisely and shared honestly. When Ethan finally stood to leave, the house felt larger, quieter, yet somehow warmer, as if the moments they had shared had filled the spaces between the walls with a subtle, lingering presence that neither of them could ignore, and Laura watched him move toward the door, noticing the careful way he adjusted his jacket, the slight hesitation in his steps, the mix of relief and lingering emotion in his eyes, and she felt a curious tenderness, a quiet recognition of how meaningful this evening had become, not because of romance or impropriety, but because of honesty, understanding, and the rare comfort of being fully seen. He paused at the doorway, looking back with a soft, genuine smile, and told her how much the night had helped him, how it had reminded him that trust and warmth could exist even when life felt complicated, and Laura felt a swell of emotion she could not name, a mixture of pride, compassion, and the bittersweet acknowledgement that human connection often left traces long after goodbyes. She spoke gently, wishing him well, reminding him that he was capable of facing life's challenges, that Noah's home, and by extension her presence, would always be a safe space for him to return to, and as he nodded, saying a quiet thank you, she realized that this evening had altered something subtle yet permanent in both of them, a mutual understanding that went beyond words, beyond age or expectation, and that this kind of connection, grounded in care and boundaries, could be as powerful as any dramatic moment life might offer. When the door closed behind him, Laura walked back into the darkened house, the echo of his footsteps still present, the party debris now quiet, the streamers sagging but almost symbolic of the fleeting, delicate nature of moments that mattered, and she sat on the edge of the couch, reflecting on the conversation, feeling the weight and the lightness of it at the same time, understanding that emotions do not always demand action, but recognition, compassion, and careful listening can leave an impact deeper than most people ever realize. And as she turned off the remaining lights one by one, she thought of Noah upstairs, carefree, unaware of the quiet exchange that had just occurred, and smiled softly, knowing that growth and care often happen in these unseen spaces. She allowed herself to feel the subtle warmth of connection, the gentle ache of human longing handled wisely, the quiet satisfaction that she had acted with integrity while offering support, and realized that the night had taught both of them something invaluable, that understanding and empathy could exist fully, honestly, and safely between people, that the heart could acknowledge complex feelings without acting impulsively, and that some of the most profound lessons and bonds are forged not in dramatic gestures, but in quiet honesty, gentle listening, and the courage to be present for someone else, even if just for a short while. And as Laura finally climbed the stairs to check on Noah, she carried with her a calm sense of fulfillment, a reminder that life's most meaningful connections often linger quietly, shaping hearts and minds, leaving memories that feel like soft light long after the noise has faded, proving that understanding, compassion, and respect can create bonds that endure, not with flash or spectacle, but with quiet, heartfelt presence that stays with you in the spaces where life feels most real and intimate.